Uh, so, Professor Guy Sorman, so is this your 20th visit to Korea or maybe 30th?
Let me count, Minte. I started in 85.
85.
First time, and I would say that I come at least twice a year.
I see.
So that must be, I would say 30. Yeah, something like 30, right.
Yeah. So Korean newspapers describe you as an economist, political scientist, or comparative civilization specialist. And how would you define or identify yourself?
Minte, when I look at the Korean media, they always want to define myself.
I see.
Which is very strange, because why should you be defined? I think I'm defined by my work. I'm defined by what I write. So, but in France, we have a specialty which is typically French. We call that a public intellectual. So, public intellectual is a person who speaks about everything, with limited knowledge.
I see.
And but basically, I'm an economist.
I see.
Yes.
So, in terms of disciplines, you move on from economy to economics to political science to
because
civilization
and even
so on.
philosophy. Because I started as an economist. And my position is that economy is useless if you do not add the cultural and philosophical dimension. Most economists explain that they make rational choices and rational decisions, but it's not true. The decision of the economist depend on some ethical choice, moral values, which you are not discussing. So my work basically is to reintroduce in the economic science a cultural dimension and philosophical choices.
Economists who are good at maybe math or statistics may say that people who are not good at statistics and math say these kind of things, introducing history and culture and so on. Were you good at math?
I was quite good at mathematics, and today, you cannot deal with economics without any mathematics. Mathematics is our common language. Okay. So, being an economist, if I want to communicate with a Korean or Chinese or Brazilian economist, I must use mathematics. Not very sophisticated, but it is our common language. But once again, and it was very clear in the 2008 crisis, because economists have now a too narrow definition of their discipline. And this is why sometimes they do not understand crisis, for example.
I see.
Crises are not statistical phenomenon. They are statistical and cultural phenomenon.
In the case of American political science, they talked about political modernization, then political development, and then democratization, democratic consolidation, and so on. In your opinion, how is Korea doing in the area of democracy? Are we doing well? Are we doing okay?
Well, when I first came to Korea, it was a military dictatorship. Okay. And there was rebellions and repression and violence. So if I look at the situation on 30 years, and I think 30 years is a minimum to evaluate the situation of South Korea, of course, Korea is on the way toward democracy, on the way. There is no perfect democracy, but you are not yet there. You are not yet there because what is missing is something absolutely essential in a democracy, is to understand that the law is above the man and not the man above the law.
I think you were first introduced to Korea as a China person, a specialist who is very much skeptical of China, and many people say that China will surpass the United States at least technologically and so on. And
Well-
is China doing okay?
Well, same. In the first time I was in China, it was during the Cultural Revolution. Okay, it was in '67, and so if I compare China, I'm sorry, I'm always taking the long view, and maybe because I'm now a bit older, I can take the long view and I can compare what I've seen 40 years ago and today. So if I compare China to the 1967, of course, I mean China is doing much better. There is no violence in China, or very limited violence. This is huge progress. Economically, it has become a land of opportunity, but China is not a model. China is not a model. It cannot be exported. What happened in China is valid only for China. And also, I want to be sure that the government in China is legitimate. I'm not sure it is legitimate. We don't know because there are no elections. Now, China taking over the United States, it's today it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible because China is not a tolerant country. China doesn't accept freedom. China doesn't accept dissidents, and this is an obstacle toward creativity. And when we look, at very simple index like the number of patents, I mean the patents registered by China are very poor, and the United States is the dominant country of our time, because we all dream about the United States. It can be nightmare for certain, okay? It's a dream or it's a nightmare. We dream about the United States. We don't dream about China.
I see. President Xi Jinping of China.
Yes.
From as a Korean, it seems to me that he is heading to the path of President Park Chung-hee
Yes.
of South Korea, of the Republic of Korea.
Yeah.
So his path is maybe doomed.
Yeah.
So China before Xi Jinping was more democratic than China today.
Yes, that's right. So first you wonder why Xi Jinping wanted to concentrate all the power in his hands. I think this is a sign not of strength, it is a sign of fragility.
I see.
Probably Xi Jinping is afraid of the competition between other powers like the military, like big business, like province governors. So it's because he's afraid of competition, so he has a need to concentrate all powers. This is very dangerous for him, because if anything wrong happens in China, he would be fully responsible.
I think humans foolishly look for power, money, sex, and so on. Maybe President Xi Jinping would be a much happier person as an individual to step down now or maybe 2 years ago and so on.
Yeah.
Why do you think he's doing that?
Once again, because he's afraid. Because he's afraid. I mean, the system which had been created by Deng Xiaoping, where you had 2 times 5 years, mean that in the second term, you were no more the president. People were looking for the successor. And Xi Jinping doesn't want that. So he's afraid to lose power. And this is why he's concentrating power. But I think that he will fail. I mean, I'm quite sure that in 5 years from now, at the end of the second term, he will have to resign, which will be good for him and good for China.
I think maybe he also feels that he has a mission to fulfill, like President Trump of the United States, who has to make America great again. Maybe President Xi Jinping feels that he has to make China great again.
Yeah, well, I don't call that a vision. I may call that nostalgia, maybe. But to have a vision is to be able to share the vision with other people. And I'm not sure that anyone is sharing Xi Jinping vision, starting with the Chinese people. I mean, the Chinese people are not that much excited about making China great again. They want to live a decent life. And they want to be free as individuals, and they don't care about China's greatness, because in the long history of China, nationalism and patriotism has never been part of the Chinese civilization. Never.
I see.
So to make China great again is an invention of a slogan which is totally foreign to the Chinese tradition. Maybe it's not Chinese.
But China has experienced with Kuomintang, the Western party politics, democracy. Taiwan has tried. Maybe China is doing quite well with Western-style democracy, and in their, I think the Chinese would say that China is already a democracy, maybe people's democracy or socialist democracy, and there's some kind of competition and so on. So
well, yes, it's certainly more democratic than it was in the time of Mao Zedong. And there is a big difference that everybody can think by himself, okay? You can think by yourself, but you better don't think as a group. You can say anything against the regime if you are 1 people, 2 people, 5 people. If you are more than 5, you begin to run risks. Okay? And what is democracy? Democracy is the right to be in the opposition without running any risk. Okay? So, in France is a democracy because I can say anything about the government. I know there is no risk. In China is not a democracy because if I oppose the regime, I'm running risk.
I see. So we are undergoing a critical moment history surrounding the Korean Peninsula. It seems to me that Xi Jinping is a tough guy. In a sense, Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, is a tough guy, and Trump is a tough guy. So, what will happen to the South Korea United States dialogue and North Korea United States dialogue?
Well, if I were to make a bet, because we are only talking about hypothesis, I think that nothing significant will happen. Why nothing significant will happen? Because all the actors in this game, in reality, are favorable to the status quo. Okay? The Chinese like the peninsula to be divided. The Japanese like it as well. The Americans are okay as far they can keep the military in South Korea and the 7th Fleet along the coast of China. So the status quo is a satisfaction for everyone except the North Korean people. But nobody listened to the North Korean people, and we don't know what they think, and they are not on the agenda. So I think the status quo will be maintained with some, superficial satisfaction, so that everybody will say, "I've won." So maybe North Korea will say, "Okay, I'm going to destroy 4 or 5 bombs, but of course I keep the capacity to be a nuclear country." China will be happy because the status quo is maintained, and Trump will say it's a victory because they have accepted to denuclearize, but nobody will get into details about what denuclearization is about.
I think I have talked with a number of U.S. public intellectuals, and
Yes.
all of them are skeptical about the outcome of the dialogue between North Korea and the United States. But what if North Korea accepts the American demands and the Republic of Korea's demands, and they say South Korea, the Republic of Korea may tell them that the American troops should stay in the Korean Peninsula.
Yes.
And what if North Korea says, okay, that's not a problem.
But they will accept. They will accept verbally. They will accept formally. They will accept. They will say, "You want denuclearization? We agree. We agree." Like the Iranian did. Okay, we accept. Of course, in exchange, we want economic benefits. We want to reopen the Kaesong zone. Maybe we want a peace treaty with South Korea, and so they're ready to accept anything. But of course, they will keep their nuclear capacity. You know, there is a big difference between nuclear capacity and nuclear armament. But it's a very theoretical line, very narrow. In the case of Iran, it's considered that Iran would need 6 weeks to go back to a nuclear program. So North Korea is very much ready to accept that, and they will ask a lot in exchange, and Trump will give a lot in exchange to show that he won the game.
So if
But basically there will be no change. It will be all cosmetic.
if the two dialogues turn out to be a failure, then what will happen? Will President Trump get very angry and attack North Korea? what will come next after the dialogue?
No, look, there is no room for failure. There won't be any failure. There is no room for a failure, okay? Nobody wants a failure. Everybody wants a victory, and everybody will claim that this is a victory. And once again, this victory will mean nothing but maintenance of the status quo, but under a different name.
I see. So,
and by the way, Trump has no legal right to attack North Korea. He needs the authorization of the Senate, and he will never have it.
but President Bush made some wars in the Middle East.
Yes, with the authorization of the Senate.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Many regimes, dictatorial or tyrannical regimes, break down after they try some kind of reform. Maybe the French King Louis XVI.
Yes.
He faced French Revolution because he tried some kind of reform.
Yes.
And he allowed, let's say, Beaumarchais.
Yes.
What's the title of the play? I forgot it.
C'était dans
the Barber of Seville.
Le Barbier de Séville.
Seville. and then the marriage of Figaro and
Yes.
so on.
Yes.
It seems to me that Louis XVI was a kind of good reformer, and
Yes.
he tried to be a kind of enlightened despot or king. Maybe Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, is trying to kind of he's trying to be a reformer, a good reformer.
Yes, yes.
And maybe the North Korean regime is facing a very serious crisis because they have the nuclear weapon.
Yes.
They feel confident, and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may think that it's now time to try some kind of reform.
Well, two things.
I see.
Two things. The first, we have to remember why North Korea has nuclear armaments and why they want to keep nuclear capacity. Nuclear armament is the purpose of nuclear armament is to maintain the status quo. Okay, nobody, and certainly not North Korea, intend to use nuclear armament to attack anyone. All the countries which have built nuclear capacity since 1945, it was to keep their independence. You take Pakistan, you take Israel, you take Argentina. I mean, all these countries built a nuclear armament. You take Iran, Libya, because this is a way not to be attacked. So if you want to maintain independence, if you feel your independence is threatened, you think that the ultimate way to keep your independence is nuclear armament. So nuclear armament is basically conservative. So this is to be understood because if you listen to Trump, North Korea is having nuclear armament to attack the United States. This is nonsense. The priority for the North Korean regime is to continue as an independent regime. This is why they build a nuclear armament, and this is why they will keep nuclear capacity. Okay. Second, reforms. You talk about Louis XVI. I'm not sure that Kim Jong-un knows Louis XVI, but he certainly knows Gorbachev.
I see.
And the Gorbachev story and the perestroika is very much in the mind of the Chinese leaders and the North Korean leaders. Do not start reforms, because if you start reforms, you are dead. And so I think the perestroika is a lesson, and probably North Korea has always refused even modest reforms like the Chinese model since 30 years. So I don't think they will start now. I think because of the kind of agreement they will reach, they think they will get enough foreign investment and exchanges to continue the way they are.
And the North Korean leader is probably aware of what happened to the Romanian president. So,
yes.
Yeah,
I know. When you talk with the communist leaders in North Korea or in Russia, I mean, they all have in mind what happened in Russia and Central Europe in '89. So they know, and this is a history that they're constantly in their mind. Not start reform, and on the contrary, be more and more repressive, and because this is the way to go on.
Some theories of revolution.
Yes.
I read that book, or I heard about him a long time ago, according to maybe Great Britain. In the case of the French Revolution, it occurred not because the French monarchy or the French economy was a disaster, but it went up, then it went down, and people could not bear with kind of downward trend.
Yes.
So maybe the North Korean economy went up.
Yes.
People in Pyongyang are happy now, and there are many some private or secret markets are sprouting throughout the whole North Korea, and and people say that 5 million North Koreans have smartphones.
Yes.
And so their economy is going up.
Yes.
Then because of the U.S. sanctions, their economy is going down. So like Louis XVI or something, they are trying kind of reform, because they have no choice. But maybe North Korea is facing a kind of a French Revolution kind of situation.
I really don't think so. First of all, what you say is very important, that the North Korean economy is growing. This is not well known, but the life is much better in North Korea, and especially in Pyongyang. Now, is it declining because of sanctions? I think sanctions have no impact. They have no impact, never. And after this dialogue, I'm quite sure that the sanction will disappear, because, as I said before, my hypothesis that everybody will say that it is a success, and if it is a success, there is no reason for sanction to go on.
Because you're a French American, so what is happening to President Macron of France? Because they are, in most cases, leftists or rightists, they take power, and centrists do not have much chance in gaining power, but President Macron succeeded. So if President Macron becomes a kind of success, he could be a model for countries like Korea and so on.
Well,
how is he doing?
Macron is doing very well internationally. He's extremely popular out of France, and it shows that he shows a lot of dignity and also a lot of strength, which has been recently shown in Syria. But from inside, the vision is very different. It's very different because, as you say, he's a centrist. So he has been elected by accident, and the right is very strong, the left is very strong, so he's really squeezed in between, and he's a man obsessed with the media. And so what he does mostly is to speak and to take initiative to be at the top of the media. But in reality, I mean, there is no continuity and no consistency in his policies, which I deeply regret.
Yeah. I think President Macron and President Trump and also Korean President Moon Jae-in,
Yes.
they are maybe too conscious of the public reaction,
Yes.
popularity.
Yeah.
Is that something good for democracy?
No, I think it's a disaster. But I think, first of all, this is the time in which we live. Okay, we live in time dominated by immediate, reward from the media. But also it has to do with the institutions. You know that any president wants to be in the light and at the top of the media. So what is important is to have institution which makes the narcissism of the president not that important. So in the United States, Trump is very narcissistic, but it has no consequence. Basically, he tweets every day. Nobody cares anymore because he doesn't have the power to implement his tweets. So in Korea and in France, the presidents have a lot of power. So if they have impulse dominated by media exposure, they have the power to apply their initiatives, and even if the initiatives are crazy. So what is very important is to have institutions which take this into consideration and which limit the power of the president. The power of the president in the United States are very limited. In France and in Korea they are not, which is very dangerous for both countries.
I think voting irregularities should be something that democracies should get rid of, but we have voting fraud arguments in the Republic of Korea, in the United States, and so on. So what should be done with, because in Korea recently people say there are some suspicion about some private groups
Yes.
who have worked on writing comments by some kind of computer program and
Yes.
so on.
Yeah.
And so what should be done with the kind of so IT
Yeah.
technologies combined with democracy
Yes.
that may not result in a good outcome.
Well, I'm not that pessimistic because, for example, everybody talks about fake news. To what extent fake news influence the result of the election? Okay, I come to your question afterward. But fake news. So people say, well, Trump has been elected because of fake news. It is not true because there are some surveys which have been done on that, and fake news influence the people who already have made their choice.
I see.
So, if you want to vote for Trump, you read fake news saying that there is a plot theory against Trump, I go for Trump. But this doesn't change the result of the election.
I see.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, about fraud itself, it's relatively easy to have a voting system which are perfectly fraud-proof and which cannot be manipulated. No, there is a tendency to, because when you don't like the result, you say it's fraud, it's fake news. Well, basically, people are not that easy to influence, and results are not that easy to manipulate.
I think a number of South Koreans think that Korea is more democratic than China, obviously, and more democratic than Japan and so on. Do you agree?
Well, more democratic than China, it's easy. Okay, it's easy. More democratic than Japan, I don't think so. Because once again, it all depends what you mean by democracy. And I said before, in a democracy, the cost of dissent is zero. In Japan, you can dissent, you can say anything against the government, you will not go to jail. Okay? In South Korea, well, you have many politicians who are in jail for good or bad reasons, but I think it's not a good sign when so many politicians are in jail, and it's not a good sign when you create a climate for revenge in a country. So I think what is needed in South Korea now is not more democracy, it's more reconciliation and more tolerance, which you don't have right now.
Yeah.
Politics is like a civil war right now.
I see. But from Korean perspective, Japan is a one-party dictatorship, pretending to be a democracy.
Yes. Yeah, but it's very well. If you look at this one-party system, and there is a lot of competition within the party.
I see.
So it may be the same party, but it's not always the same people, because you have competition to be appointed in Japan, and once again it all means how you define democracy. Democracy, I say, two criteria: the cost of dissent is zero, and the law is above the politician. In Korea, the two criteria are not totally fulfilled.
You know, formerly, even North Korea is a multi-party democracy.
Yes.
China is, along with the Communist Party of China, they have a number of parties and so on. But it seems to me that Korea is a true democracy because we have at least two-party or three-party system.
Yes.
So Korea is a true democracy.
Well, yeah, I would say it's on the way towards democracy, but really, I mean, the president is like an elected king, and this is not very democratic. What is democratic is to have check and balance, which you don't have right now in Korea.
Korean president may be elected king, but that may be the same with the American president. The American presidency is a kind of evolved system of Tudor kind of kingship and so on. And,
yeah, but the American president has no power. He has no power. He has the power to speak, but he has very limited power. I mean, he cannot appoint anybody without the approval of the Senate. He cannot even choose his minister without the approval of the Senate. He cannot start a war without the approval of the Senate. I mean, his powers, when you want to forbid immigration from certain countries, any judge in the United States can cancel the decree of the president. This is unheard of in France or in Korea. And if I may add something, to have a true democracy, you need to have a full participation of the women in the democratic system. So what about the participation of the women in the democratization of South Korea? They are totally in Korea, you forget the women and you forget the North Korean.
At least we have had the first female president. So we are far ahead of the United States where Hillary Clinton could not become the first female president.
That's a great alibi. It's not an argument. It's not an argument. An alibi is not an argument. It's like, anti-Semitic people say, well, I have a good friend who is Jewish, so it's the same story. We have a woman as president, or we have a black man as president. It doesn't solve the problem.
So in France, you have never had a female president. So
in France?
In France.
We had women as prime minister.
I see.
But not as president.
Ségolène Royal.
Yeah, she failed. But we had the prime minister was a woman, Edith Cresson, a long time ago. Yes.
So,
but once again, if you think that you need to have a woman as president to demonstrate that women are equal with men, there is something wrong in the discussion. It's not one person as a president, which it's a totally different story.
So. Do you think in the end the whole world is marching towards kind of democratic capitalism?
Well, the whole world is marching for sure. In what direction, it is absolutely impossible to know. I think for an intellectual, it's very dishonest to predict the future. And because the future is unpredictable by definition, we can make scenarios, we can make hypotheses, or we can look at what happened during our lifetime. And, I was born during World War II, and the world was dominated by fascism and communism. Fascism has disappeared, communism has disappeared, so you don't have democracy everywhere, but everybody pretends to be democratic. So in a way, democracy is the ultimate goal. So some countries are, nearer, further, but nobody really proposed an alternative. Even China pretends to be a democracy. Even North Korea pretends to be a democracy. So the target, the ultimate goal is democracy. Democracy, once again, you have to go back to what I said before, you to define what you mean by that. The rule of law and the possibility to be a dissident.
So I think at least 5 or 6 books of yours have been published in Korea.
Yes.
Are you working on a new book?
Well, actually, I just published a new book released in France last week, and called Journal d'ailleurs, which means diary from an outsider. I would translate like that. An outsider diary. That's the title. So tomorrow I'll be in Taipei for the Chinese version of my book, and there is an English version which is running. Korea, I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe one day, if we could find a Western publisher,
yes,
we should publish The Power of Korea or The Power of East Asia.
Yeah, but the book needs to be written first. There is a very strange disequilibrium, imbalance between Asia and the West. The Westerners are writing hundreds, thousands of books on Asia. Very few Asians write about Europe.
I see.
If you take China, for example, every year in Europe and United States, we publish 200 books on China. No Chinese ever wrote a book about Europe. So it's the same about Korea. I would be delighted to read a book by a Korean writer or Chinese writer about Europe or about France, but maybe we are not interesting enough.
I see. Yeah. So, what would be one last thing you would emphasize to your Korean readers of your books?
What should I say to the Korean readers?
Yeah.
I think that the two major problems which I see in Korea right now, or three major problems, maybe very rapidly. First, the condition of women. I'm trying to speak. It's not because of the Me Too movement. I'm trying to speak about the condition of women since many years. I was censored on KBS. Because I wanted to talk about the condition of women on the KBS television. And the KBS producer said, no, it's not a problem. And that was 3 years ago. Okay? So I think the Me Too movement and condition of women is that we are talking about democratization. Democratization means that women should have the same rights as men, and it is not the case in Korea today. Okay? That's the first problem. Second, the economy in Korea is not doing that well. Not doing that well because the control by the chaebol is too monopolistic. So I'm not against the chaebol, I'm against the monopoly of the chaebol. Third, the understanding of democracy in South Korea, it seems to me, is far from being perfect. It is not yet well understood that democracy means the right for the opposition, the right to dissent, and the rule of law above the rule of men. So these are the three problems which I think are significant right now.
I think all countries have their own rights to march toward their own path of democracy. I think the Republic of Korea is doing fine. That's our Korean-style democracy.
Yeah, but I'm okay. As I said, I'm so being a visitor and a lover of South Korea. having seen this country under a military dictatorship, I mean, it's a permanent joy to see what the country has become. 30 years ago, you would give a conference at a Korean university. You would ask the student, do you have any question? Nobody dare ask a question, Today, I gave a conference at the university, at Hankook University. I mean, I spoke for half an hour, the student spoke for 2 hours. So this is democracy. This is democracy. When the students dare to speak, ask questions, and they are not afraid to speak up their mind and talk about everything. And this is a very good sign of real democracy. I mean, democracy at the society level, not at the political level only.
In Korean, Chinhan is pro-Korean and Jihan is Korea knowing. In my last article about you, I defined you as a pro-Korean. Western intellectual. Was my understanding of you right?
No.
You are pro-Korean.
I'm very much pro-Korean. But I would say I'm
much more than Korea doing intellectual. Right?
Oh yes. I mean, I'm pro-Korean, but in depth. I mean, to be pro-Korean is not to be an admirer in Korea. I think to be pro-Korean means also to be able to criticize Korea. I mean, good friends are made to criticize, If you love everything in Korea, if you don't make any criticism, you are not a friend of Korea, okay? I consider myself as a friend because I make a lot of criticism. And I know it's not the Korean tradition, and some Koreans don't like it, but this is the way my friendship shows.
Okay, thank you very much for this great interview opportunity. I look forward to another interview and so on.
Okay, let's go on. Let's go on.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Louis XVI, it's a very complicated story because the revolution, of course, was an accident in a way. If everybody agreed to have a constitutional monarchy in 1792. But then the king made a big mistake. He tried to flee to Austria because of the influence of his wife. And he destroyed what he had achieved, which was to transform the absolute monarchy into a constitutional monarchy. So the real culprit is Marie Antoinette.
I see. So it's a great story.
It's really the fault of Marie Antoinette. If he had not followed the advice of his wife, France would have become like England, a constitutional monarchy. We would not have a revolution. We would not have Napoleon, and we would have been much better off. But that's history. Accident happens.
And if the French monarchy survived, that would be quite good for the French tourism industry.
Yeah, of course, because everybody loved kings and queens, sure, yes. And we would have avoided 20 years of civil war, basically.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.